Hey there movie fans, I'm John Andersen and I'm continuing my series on the Spider-Man franchise leading up to the release of Spider-Man Homecoming this July. We already took a look at the original Sam Raimi trilogy, which if you haven't seen my reviews on those films, be sure to click the card above for a link to the playlist. Now with that out of the way, let's look at the next incarnation of the Spider-Man franchise. After the monumental disappointment of Spider-Man 3 and Sam Raimi's departure from Spider-Man 4 due to constant studio meddling, Sony was left with two options: either continue production on Spider-Man 4 without Sam Raimi, or reboot the franchise just 10 years after the original. And so they decided on a hybrid of the two options, for better or worse. Peter Parker is haunted by the memory of his parents, and after investigating the company his father worked for, he is bitten by a spider and acquires superhuman powers. Now thrust into the superhero lifestyle, Peter must learn how to balance his superhero persona as well as being a teenager. I remember being so excited for this film, with Mark Webb attached, who directed one of my favorite films of all time, 500 Days of Summer, and the recent Gifted, which if you haven't seen my review for that film, be sure to click the card above. And seeing Andrew Garfield on the cover of EW magazine as Spider-Man really got me thinking that this film could work. Then the film came out, and I remember really liking it at first, but grew more cynical as certain elements of the film bothered me the more I watched it. But in rewatching the film for this review after so many years, I actually had a similar experience as I had the first time watching it, which was honestly really surprising to me. The film begins with a heavy focus on the mystery of Peter's parents, which I always thought was a good first step, as that's something that was never really explored in the original trilogy, or in the comics for that matter. But the issue with this plot thread is that they introduce this idea, but don't do that much with it, as there's already so much going on in the film already. However, to me it always felt like this was going to be an overarching plot thread for this new trilogy, but at this point we're never going to see that. Although it was intriguing at the time, it also gave Garfield a lot of emotion to pull from in his performance.
It's all well and good, so where is he?
What?
Where is he? Where's my dad? He didn't think it was his responsibility to be here to tell me this himself.
Oh, come on, how dare you?
How dare I? How dare you?
Then we meet this version of Peter Parker, who's more of an outcast than a nerd, which I thought was an appropriate modernization of the character. And I like how they were able to subtly establish his intelligence at first through his actions and not an expository scene of somebody telling us how smart he is. But as the film goes on, the character does make questionable revelations and decisions that make me question his intelligence just to move the plot along, with the bit where he doesn't know Kurt Connors is the Lizard.
Excuse me, Dr. Connors. And the doctor turns around and he's kind of thinning on one side of his hair, and he's got like scales down his neck, and he's like, ah! Like he's like that, and he's like, could you tell me how to kill a giant lizard?
Right.
And he's like, why do you want to know about lizards? Lizards are they're the greatest. Ah! And Peter Parker's like,
I wish I was a lizard. I am a lizard.
And Peter Parker's like, okay, that's interesting. All right, makes sense. And then Connors leaves, and then you think, I thought when I saw this, oh, he's tweaked.
Yeah.
Because he's just playing along.
Right.
But then he looks down and he sees a rat that he was experimenting on, or a mouse, and he sees that it's turned into a half lizard, half rat. And then you see him go, oh my god. And not like the penny dropped. Why did it take that point the penny dropped? You're supposed to be smart, Peter Parker!
And when he brings a camera with his name on it to catch the lizard. But the biggest issues I had with the character of Peter Parker in this film was his awkwardness and his selfishness. I mean, when you look like this, there's no reason you should be that awkward.
It's impossible. I wish I could just...
I mean, I know it's high school, and I'm sure the coolest kids had their awkward moments. I wouldn't know I wasn't one of them. Don't act so surprised. But Garfield's Parker reminds me a lot of that guy that girls would just flock to based on his looks. And by senior year, you should be able to ask a girl out.
So, you want to, I don't know.
Want what?
And lastly, for majority of the film, Peter's oblivious to how he treats his aunt and his uncle, is obsessed with revenge, and is a general dick, for lack of a better word. The one selfless act he does in the film is he refuses to take the picture of Flash bullying another student, and takes a beating for it. But every other heroic act in the film feels unearned, as it feels like he's being guilted into being a hero rather than realizing what it means to do the right thing. Which leads me to the death of Uncle Ben, where I think Martin Sheen gives a great performance, and I appreciate that they were trying to do something different, but again, Peter comes off as selfish in the moment, and lacks that perfect symmetry of what it means to do the right thing and be a hero that the original Sam Raimi film was able to capture so well. I believe this film tries to evoke that message during the dinner scene at the Stacy's home, where Captain Stacy is trying to teach Peter that there's more to being a hero than vengeance, and that's why he stops pursuing his uncle's killer, but that isn't fully translated or realized, and it just makes it come off as the plotline was dropped. In regard to how Peter gets his powers in this film, again they try to tell the same story in a slightly different way. Instead of accidentally being bit by the spider, he's snooping around Oscorp and stumbles upon it, which, one, how does Oscorp not have surveillance of this guy walking around their halls? And two, it paints Peter in a bad light as he's asking for trouble instead of it being a pure accident. My biggest peeve with this film is Peter's apparent use of his powers. Yes, there are moments in the original film where it's questionable how nobody knew Peter was Spider-Man, but there are countless moments in this film that make me scratch my head and wonder how nobody knows Peter is Spider-Man with all these blunt displays of power. Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy has great chemistry with Garfield, which was apparent as they were dating at the time, but the biggest comment I've heard in regard to her character is how much better she was when compared to Kirsten Dunst's Mary Jane. Which I agree it was a bit of an improvement, but there's really only one scene in this film that she's really proactive, and I wouldn't say she's leaps and bounds better than Mary Jane in my opinion. It was always clear to me that Sam Raimi was planting the seeds to turn Dylan Baker's Kirk Connors into the Lizard, and I believe that was the plan for Spider-Man 4. So now when you have this new version of Kirk Connors and the Lizard, it can't help but feel tacked on as just another big bad for Spider-Man to fight. Not to say that there's no attempts to make this character more compelling. I think Mark Webb was trying his damnedest to make this character more sympathetic, but because there's so much going on in this film, it just gets lost in the shuffle. The biggest compliment I could give this film is that the action sequences are shot very well. I love the bridge sequence as it's a great character moment for Peter, as even with the mask on, he comes off very selfish a lot of the time.
I just did 80% of your job. Huh? That's how you were paying me?
The only issue I had with this sequence is that he claims to be Spider-Man for no rhyme or reason, when it was so apparent in the original film.
Who are you? Spider-Man.
What's your name, kid?
The human spider.
A human spider, that's it? That's the best you got?
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks.
I also really enjoy the fight at the school, where I feel like the action moves very organically, and it also houses probably the best Stan Lee cameo to date. I even like the end battle, which is arguably the weakest of the three action sequences, but I always found the crane sequence to be a little cheesy, even though it does allow James Horner's theme to really shine. Not nearly as iconic as Danny Elfman's score, but a great score nonetheless. So I think I went on about this film long enough. It's impossible not to compare this film to Sam Raimi's original, though the film does make a valiant effort to differentiate itself from its predecessor, even if it doesn't land every time. The cast as a whole is giving it their all, with fun action throughout, and that's why, for me, The Amazing Spider-Man, despite its flaws, is a really good movie. So those are my thoughts on The Amazing Spider-Man. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down in the comments below. And be sure to join me next month when we look at the franchise killer, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Also, be sure to click right here to see my review from last week on The Fate and the Furious. And click over here to see my latest series reviews on Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides and Christopher Nolan's Insomnia. Also, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my social media links down in the description below. Until next time, don't forget to watch some movies.